biblical Abraham, father of the Hebrews, was a man of color, a black man. So, why aren't the modern-day Israelites people of color? Why aren't they black-skinned? When we hear the word Israel, most people picture a Middle Eastern country with desert landscapes, ancient history, and a region deeply rooted in Semitic culture. It's a land surrounded by Arab nations, with a climate, geography, and cultural heritage tied to the East. Naturally, you'd expect the people to reflect that identity, but then you look closer at the faces in the government, the military leadership, the media, and the power structures, and a different image starts to form. You see European features, lighter skin tones, and Western mannerisms dominating a country that is geographically and historically Middle Eastern. So the question becomes, who are these white Israelis? Are they native to the land? Are they recent settlers? What's their real history? And how did a European identity come to define a nation in the Middle East? And how did they come to represent a land that, for centuries, looked and lived very differently? The answers take us through waves of migration, colonial ties, religious narratives, and racial politics that have reshaped not just Israel, but the way the world sees it. In this video, we're peeling back the layers of history, migration, and power to understand who these white Israelis are, where they came from, and what their presence means in the broader conversation about race, land, and identity. While we're at it, don't forget to support our works by hitting the thumbs up button in front of you, share this video to many others all across the globe, and subscribe to stay tuned in to our channel for more revealing contents which centers all around Black experience and truth. Now let's get back on the road. According to a Google source, the Israelis are the citizens and nationals of the State of Israel. The country's populace is composed primarily of Jews and Arabs, who respectively account for 75% and 20% of the national figure, followed by other ethnic and religious minorities, who account for about 5% of the country's population. The source went further to say that since Israel's independence in 1948, Israelis and the people of Israeli descent have had a considerable diaspora, which largely overlaps with the Jewish diaspora, but also with that of other ethnic and religious groups. And as of 2013, Israel's population was around 8 million, of which the Israeli civil government records 75.3% as Jews, 20.7% as non-Jewish Arabs, and 4% other. The source goes on to say that among Jews, 70.3% were born in Israel, Sabras, mostly from the second or third generation of their family in the country, and the rest are Jewish immigrants. Of the Jewish immigrants, 20.5% were from Europe and the Americas, and 9.2% were from Asia, Africa, and Middle Eastern countries. Nearly half of all Israeli Jews are descended from immigrants from the European Jewish diaspora. Approximately the same number are descended from immigrants from Arab countries, Iran, Turkey, and Central Asia. Over 200,000 are of Ethiopian and Indian Jewish descent. These estimates were given so neatly and quite convincing, but are they true? Is it true that just a few from the vast Israeli population come from African descent? Now let's dive deeper into the historical roots of a question that continues to spark global controversy and heated debate. Who truly are the white Israelis? How did they come to dominate nearly every corner of Israeli society, politically, economically, and culturally? And more importantly, why is it that those of African descent, including Black Jews, often find themselves marginalized, silenced, or outright oppressed in a nation that claims to represent all Jews? This isn't just a conversation about ethnicity, it's a revealing look at how power, race, and identity collide in one of the most politically sensitive regions in the world. If Israel is a homeland for all Jews, then why does it seem like only a certain kind of Jew, the white, Ashkenazi, European, sits at the top, while Black and brown Jews fight for basic recognition and respect? Let us now uncover the historical truth that the headlines would not dare show you. The ancient Israelites were a Hebraic group of people who lived in the ancient Middle East. Sometime in the 9th or 10th century BC, they wrote and codified the Hebrew Bible, largely the same material as the Christian Old Testament, and are considered the ancestors to the world's Jewish population of today. The origins of the ancient Israelites span 1800 to 1200 BC. The dates given for this period are only rough approximations. Our only sources for this era are vague references largely from the Hebrew Bible. Regardless of the issues with dating, it is likely that the Israelites began as semi-nomadic pastoral tribes migrating west through Mesopotamia and Sumer. Although originally settling in Canaan, modern-day Israel, Palestine, and Lebanon, a large portion of Israelites migrated to Egypt sometime in the 16th or 17th centuries BC. The original Israelites, tracing back to biblical times, were indeed of the black race, contrary to the modern-day perception of Israel being predominantly white. Abraham, a pivotal figure in the biblical narrative, was, of a truth, black, being a descendant of Shem. In the book, The Original Black Jews, by Windsor, Rudolph R., 1935, for instance, the author discusses the origins of the Hamites and Shemites, or Semites. He states that the original Israelites were of the black race, and that the biblical Abraham, or Abram, was a black Shemite, which happens to be a descendant of Shem. Abraham was the father of both the Hebrew Israelites and Arab nations. The Hebrew Israelites trace their history back to the biblical Jacob, twin brother to Esau, who was later named Israel, whose children would be the Israelites. On the other hand, the Arab nations would mean Ishmael, being Abraham's first child and son, whom he had with the Egyptian Hagi, who happened to be the slave maid of Abraham's wife, Sarah. The Creator's words had come to pass, according to the biblical scriptures, that the both would turn out to be great nations. The black Shemites had intermarried with black Hamite Egyptian women, giving rise to the Arab nation. Arabia was originally inhabited by the Ethiopians, who are also known as the Cushites, prior to the progenitors of the Arabs. Many of today's Arabs are not black due to the introduction of white slavery. Another case scenario of biblical black figures that highlights the original Israelites as black is the story of King Solomon of Jerusalem and the Queen of Sheba, known as Makeda by the Ethiopians. This story points to the origins of the present black Jews of Ethiopia, known as the Falashas. The Falashas claim descent from the child of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, Menelik I. The queen had returned to Sheba, which was part of the Ethiopian Empire, with Menelik. Later on, Menelik was sent to his father in Jerusalem to be educated, where he accepted the name David. The Jews who returned to Ethiopia with Menelik I are the ancestors of the Falashas. The famous Ethiopian emperor, Haile Selassie, was also believed to be a descendant of Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, all from African descent. The book also describes the origins of Christianity and Islam, which are the offspring of Judaism. Here, the author refers to Christianity and Islam as the two daughters of Judaism. According to the Jewish Encyclopedia, the terms Hebrews and Israelites usually describe the same people, stating that they were called Hebrews before the conquest of the land of Canaan and Israelites afterwards. The Hebrews were an ancient Semitic-speaking people. Historians mostly consider the Hebrews as synonymous with the Israelites, with the term Hebrew denoting an Israelite from the nomadic era that preceded the establishment of the United Kingdom of Israel. According to the Deuteronomistic history in the Hebrew Bible, a united monarchy or United Kingdom of Israel existed under the reigns of Saul, Eshbal, David, and Solomon, encompassing the territories of both the later kingdoms of Judah and Israel. Whether the united monarchy existed, and if so, to what extent, is a matter of ongoing academic debate. During the 1980s, some biblical scholars had begun to argue that the archaeological evidence for an extensive kingdom before the late 8th century BCE is too weak, and that the methodology used to obtain the evidence is flawed. Scholars had remained divided among those who support the historicity of the biblical narrative, those who doubt or dismiss it, and those who support the kingdom's theoretical existence, while maintaining that the biblical narrative is exaggerated. Proponents of the kingdom's existence traditionally date it to between 1047 BCE and 930 BCE. According to the basic interpretation, the ancestral lineage of the 12 tribes of Israel suggests that they were originally black, tracing their roots back to African ancestors. The tribes are explicitly named in the Bible, which traces their roots back to the ancient Jewish patriarchs. Having seen that the ancient Israelites had African origins, I bet the question running through your mind will be, what then is the historical background of the modern-day white Jewish population, and how did they come to be identified as Israelites? The term white Israelis typically refers to Israeli citizens who are of European or Caucasian descent, particularly those from Ashkenazi Jewish backgrounds. Ashkenazi Jews are descendants of Jewish communities that originated in Central and Eastern Europe, and many of them migrated to Israel during the 20th century. However, it's important to note that the concept of whiteness is complex and can be problematic, as it often carries connotations of privilege, power, and racial hierarchy. In Israel, the category of white Israelis can be seen as a social and political construct, as it encompasses a diverse range of communities and ethnicities. Some of the groups that might be included in the category of white Israelis are: 1. The Ashkenazi Jews of European descent. In the 8th century, a Turkic people called the Khazars ruled a vast empire in Eastern Europe, stretching from modern-day Ukraine to Kazakhstan. The Khazars were a powerful and influential nation, strategically located between Europe and Asia, controlling key trade routes, including the Silk Road. Around 740 CE, the Khazar king, Bulan, converted to Judaism, and many of his people followed suit. This conversion was likely influenced by Jewish merchants and traders who traveled along the Silk Road, introducing Judaism to the Khazar elite. The Khazars established a Jewish kingdom with its capital in Atil, modern-day Astrakhan, Russia. The kingdom was a hub of intellectual and spiritual activity, attracting Jewish scholars and teachers from across the ancient world. The Khazar Jews developed their own distinct traditions, blending Jewish practices with Turkic and Slavic customs. By the 10th century, the Khazar kingdom declined, weakened by internal conflicts and external pressures from neighboring powers. Many Khazar Jews migrated to Eastern Europe, particularly to Poland, Lithuania, and Ukraine, where they merged with existing Jewish communities. This migration marked the beginning of Ashkenazi Jewry, as Khazar Jews integrated with local Jewish populations, adopting customs and practices from their new environments. During the Middle Ages, some European groups, like the Normans and Saxons, converted to Judaism, further increasing the Ashkenazi Jewish population. These conversions often occurred in response to economic opportunities or social mobility. Converts brought their own cultural practices and languages, enriching the Ashkenazi Jewish heritage. Over time, the Ashkenazi Jews intermarried with local European populations, adopting customs, languages, and cultural practices. This assimilation contributed to the development of distinct Ashkenazi Jewish traditions, such as Yiddish language and literature. The Ashkenazi Jews also developed unique religious practices, like the use of Hebrew and Aramaic in liturgy. Hebrew was primarily used as a literary and sacred language until its 20th century revival as a common language in Israel. Ashkenazim adapted their traditions to Europe and underwent a transformation in their interpretation of Judaism. In the late 18th and 19th centuries, Jews who remained in or returned to historical German lands experienced a cultural reorientation. Under the influence of the Haskalah and the struggle for emancipation, as well as the intellectual and cultural ferment in urban centers, some gradually abandoned Yiddish in favor of German and developed new forms of Jewish religious life and cultural identity. Throughout the centuries, Ashkenazim made significant contributions to Europe's philosophy, scholarship, literature, art, music, and science. As a proportion of the world Jewish population, Ashkenazim were estimated to be 3% in the 11th century, rising to 92% in 1930, very close to the population's peak. The Ashkenazi population was significantly diminished by the Holocaust carried out by Nazi Germany during World War II, which killed some 6 million Jews, affecting almost every European Jewish family. In 1933, prior to World War II, the estimated worldwide Jewish population was 15.3 million. Israeli demographer and statistician Sergio D. Pergola implied that Ashkenazim comprised 65 to 70% of Jews worldwide in 2000, while other estimates suggest more than 75%. As of 2013, the population was estimated to be between 10 million and 11.2 million. Recent genetic studies reveal that Ashkenazi Jews have a complex ancestry, with origins in the Middle East, about 30 to 40%, Europe, about 40 to 50%, and North Africa and the Caucasus, about 10 to 20%. This genetic diversity reflects the Khazars and Ashkenazi Jews' history of migration, intermarriage, and assimilation. Today, Ashkenazi Jews comprise approximately 80% of the global Jewish population, with communities in Europe, North America, Israel, and beyond. Their rich cultural heritage, shaped by centuries of migration and assimilation, continues to influence Jewish identity and traditions worldwide. 2. The Sephardi Jews of Spanish and Portuguese descent. The Sephardi Jews of Spanish and Portuguese descent are also another group of white Israelis that have been giving black Israelis difficult times in terms of racial inequality. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Sephardi Jews from Spain and Portugal began migrating to Palestine. Then under Ottoman rule, they were drawn by the promise of religious freedom and the chance to escape persecution. As Zionist ideology gained traction, more Sephardi Jews arrived, eager to build a new life in the Jewish homeland. However, they faced discrimination from Ashkenazi Jewish immigrants who saw them as Arab Jews or Oriental Jews. Despite this, the Sephardi Jews thrived in Palestine, establishing communities and cultural institutions. But with the establishment of Israel in 1948, their identity began to shift. Israeli policy and education emphasized the importance of European heritage, and Sephardi Jews began to adopt Ashkenazi customs and language. They were encouraged to abandon their Ladino language and Middle Eastern traditions, which were seen as backward and Arab. As Sephardi Jews assimilated into Israeli society, they started to identify as white and European, distancing themselves from their Middle Eastern and North African roots. This process was reinforced by Israel's Eurocentric culture and the desire to westernize the country. Over time, Sephardi Jews became white Israelis, an identity that obscured their real complex history and cultural heritage. Today, some Sephardi Jews in Israel continue to grapple with their identity, seeking to reclaim their Sephardic roots and challenge the dominant Ashkenazi narrative. 3 immigrants from the former Soviet Union and other European countries. Immigrants from the former Soviet Union and other European countries, particularly those who arrived in Israel in the late 1990s and early 2000s, have also played a significant role in the racial segregation and discrimination faced by black Israelis. These immigrants, hailing from countries such as Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus, were driven by factors like political instability and economic hardship following the Soviet Union's dissolution. As many of these individuals were Jewish or had Jewish ancestry, they were eligible for Israeli citizenship under the law of return, which has contributed to the complexities of Israel's demographic landscape and the ongoing issues of racial tension and inequality. They were majorly attracted to Israel's promise of safety, economic opportunity, and a chance to reconnect with their Jewish heritage. Some were also motivated by a desire to escape anti-Semitism and discrimination in their home countries. As a result, Israel experienced a significant influx of new citizens who would eventually become an integral part of Israeli society. Upon arrival, they were initially considered others within Israeli society. However, as they assimilated, they began to be perceived as white Israelis. This shift was facilitated by their European background, which aligned with the dominant Ashkenazi culture. As they settled in Israel, they adopted Hebrew, learned about Jewish customs, and integrated into society. Many abandoned their unique cultural identities and embraced Ashkenazi norms, which were seen as the standard for Israeliness. Over time, they became an integral part of Israeli society, contributing to its diversity and complexity. Today, many immigrants from European countries are identified as white Israelis, often unaware of the historical power dynamics that shaped their identity. The small country of Israel was established as a refuge for the oppressed white European Jews, who in turn became oppressors of people of color, the Palestinians. 4. The Mizrahi Jews of Middle Eastern and North African descent. In 1948, Mizrahi Jews from the Middle East and North Africa migrated to Israel, a pivotal moment in the country's founding. Concurrently, a significant event unfolded: the displacement of over 700,000 Palestinians, who were either expelled or forced to flee their homes in the territory that would become the Jewish state. But from the early days of the state, there was a group that didn't buy the justification: the Jews with roots in the Arab and Muslim world. Called Mizrahim in Israel, these Jews today make up the largest ethnic group in the country. They mostly immigrated to Israel after 1948, and for much of the country's history, they have been victims of the same kind of anti-Arab ideology that is wielded against the Palestinians. For centuries, these Mizrahi Jews had enjoyed high status in their countries of origin in the Middle East and North Africa, which ranged from Iraq to Egypt to Morocco. But when they landed in Israel, they found that the new state was ruled by European Jews, called Ashkenazim, who overwhelmingly viewed them as primitive and culturally backward. As Mizrahi Jews assimilated into Israeli society, they faced intense pressure to abandon their Middle Eastern and North African cultures. This was perpetuated by the Ashkenazi-dominated government, education system, and media, which promoted a Eurocentric worldview. The Mizrahi Jews were encouraged to adopt Ashkenazi customs, language, and practices, and suppress their traditional ways. Today, the Israeli government and media often portray Mizrahi Jews as backward and uncivilized, and many of them are being forced to abandon their cultural traditions and language in order to become Israeli. Mizrahi Jews are also subject to intense whitening policies aimed at erasing their non-European features. This included forced assimilation, cultural suppression, and even physical transformation. For example, they were offered nose jobs to fix non-European facial features. Some Mizrahi Jews were even forced to change their names to sound more Israeli in order to gain acceptance and access to resources and opportunities. Through this process, Mizrahi Jews began to identify themselves as white Israelis, a classification that obscured their Middle Eastern and North African heritage. This shift was not a natural evolution, but a result of systemic discrimination and cultural erasure. Mizrahi intellectuals at the time were quick to link the discrimination against them to the discrimination against Palestinians. Orientalism, Palestinian scholar Edward Said's term for a European tendency to portray the East as exotic, irrational, and uncivilized, was being used to cast both groups as inferior and deny them equal rights. Their struggle was one and the same, and so, starting in the 1950s, Mizrahim and Palestinians formed a solidarity movement, producing everything from joint magazines to joint street protests. This movement offered a counterpoint to the villa in the jungle view of Israel, an alternative vision for how Jews and Palestinians can live together on the land. It also offers a more nuanced way to think about contemporary debates on the meaning of indigeneity, nationhood, and colonialism in Israel-Palestine. Going forward, although Israeli society is not racially divided between blacks and whites in the way that American society has long been, still blackness in Israel has shaped the relations between Jews and Arabs, Ashkenazim and Mizrahim, Ethiopians and immigrant workers from Africa. Despite the salience of blackness in Israel, scholars of Israel and the wider academic field of Israel studies have largely ignored it so far. And a great reason for this scholarly neglect is that in Israel, blackness does not neatly fit into the conventional configurations that exist in countries like the US and the UK. In its uniqueness, the Israeli case shows that blackness transgresses color lines in new and unexpected ways, offering fresh perspectives on Israeli society and challenging the arbitrary stipulations of blackness as a concept. There are many significant differences, but also some similarities. While Israeli society is not racially divided between blacks and whites in the way that American society has long been, Israelis are certainly not colorblind, and having black skin can also have fatal consequences in Israel. For instance, in June 2019, Solomon Tekka, an 18-year-old Israeli Jew of Ethiopian descent, was shot to death by an Israeli policeman. This outburst had sparked widespread demonstrations and rioting at the time. The Solomon Tekka incident was not an unprecedented event. In April 2015, video footage of Israeli policemen brutalizing Damas Pakata, a Jewish Ethiopian soldier, moved thousands of Israelis, Ethiopians, and others to the streets. One of the reasons this incident prompted a strong reaction was the fact that Pakada was an on-duty soldier wearing his military uniform. Military service is widely perceived as the ultimate rite of passage into Israeli society and as a stamp of approval for being a loyal Israeli citizen. Watching the footage of the assault on Damas Pakada that was captured by a security camera, many Israelis saw Pakada not only as an individual, but as an example of the successful assimilation of Ethiopians in Israel. Yet, the incident revealed that despite this assimilation, Ethiopian Israelis still suffer from police brutality and discrimination, even when they are in their official garb. Thus, in their protests, Israeli Ethiopians accused the police and the Israeli establishment more broadly of racism against their community due to their skin color. Such claims by Ethiopian Israelis and the statistics that support them have had a strong impact on Israeli public opinion. Notwithstanding the many schisms and tensions characterizing Israeli society, most Israelis still adhere to the idea of eliminating the differences between Jews in the country. Although the term black was used in Israeli discourse even before the establishment of the state and was attributed to various groups, Israelis do not usually perceive themselves or groups in Israeli society in racial terms. Therefore, the Pakada incident, revealing this hidden racial aspect, gained widespread attention in Israel well beyond the Ethiopian community. This was not the first time, however, that blackness was associated with official racism and discrimination in Israel. In 1971, second-generation Mizrahi immigrants living in the poor neighborhood of Musrara in Jerusalem formed the Israeli Black Panther movement. By identifying themselves as blacks, these Mizrahi youngsters alluded to the gap between the official Zionist narrative of ingathering the Jewish exiles and the reality in which some Jews remained outsiders in their home country. For the Israeli Black Panthers, blackness would serve mainly as a metaphor, whereas for Ethiopian Israelis, blackness is the material fact of their skin color, which makes them a target for institutional and systemic discrimination. Another scenario of this institutional and systemic discrimination is the case of Tovit Israel and dozens of other residents of the Village of Peace who have lived in fear. Dimona, a city on the edge of the nation of Israel's Negev desert, has been her home for 24 years. Her 8 children were born there, and they've known no other country. Now, she and 44 other undocumented members of the African Hebrew Israelites of Jerusalem face deportation.
Receiving the order to leave 2 years ago was a moment of disbelief for Israel. I feel like the government has been merciless to me and my children.
The Black Hebrews, as the spiritual community's members, are known to have first made their way to Israel from the United States in the 1960s. While members do not consider themselves Jewish, they are of an ancestral connection to Israel. Around 3,000 Black Hebrews live in remote, hardscrabble towns in southern Israel. The Village of Peace, a cluster of low-slung buildings surrounded by vegetable patches and immaculate gardens in Dimona, is the community's epicenter. From all ramifications, it could be seen that beneath the surface of the label, White Israeli, lies a profound narrative of resilience, forged in the crucible of history, culture, and circumstance. Their identities are a mosaic of multifaceted experiences, shaped by the indelible scars of the Holocaust, the vibrant heritage of European Jewish traditions, and the unyielding determination of immigrants seeking refuge. This complex identity is further enriched by the dynamic interplay between tradition and modernity, as well as the intricate dance between ethnicity, religion, and nationality. Yet, amidst this rich tapestry, a painful reality persists: the struggles of Black Israelis who continue to face the harsh sting of discrimination, their voices often silenced, their stories overlooked. The contrast is stark, a poignant reminder of the complexities that define the Israeli experience. In the end, the question is not just about who white Israelis are, but about the stories they tell, the histories we uncover, and the humanity we share. As we reflect on the complexities of identity, the nuances of